Hey everyone, this is Ben from MotoCampNerd.com, and you're listening to the Finding Camp podcast. More than ever, people are getting on a motorcycle and going camping. On this show, we talk about all things motorcycles, camping, and moto travel. So let's get into it. Camping and coffee. Those things just go together, right? And so a frequent question I see come up all the time is, what's the best coffee setup for camping or moto camping? And so I've actually had an outline that I've been working on making a video for, but I just have not had the time to make the video or even the blog. And so I figured, well, while I've got the time to be able to sit here and babble on about it, why not just put this into the podcast? And it's come up recently a couple of times, so I keep refreshing and updating my outline. And so I want to jump in today about camping and coffee and all the different ways you can do it. And, of course, I'm going to tell you what my personal favorite way is. So let's start at the top. And I'm going to list these from the easiest, simplest, less cleanup, less moving parts, and less equipment required, to the most difficult, or not really difficult, but just the most fiddly and parts associated and equipment needed kind of thing. Of course, all of these are going to take water of some sort. So either you're carrying water or you're finding water or obviously the basic for coffee is water and coffee. So let's just get that out of the way. So number one is going to be, you guessed it, instant coffee. Literally for instant coffee, all you need is the packet of instant coffee and water. It doesn't even have to be hot water, really. You could put it in cold water. It just takes a little bit longer to dissolve, and it may taste different. But essentially, you could have a water bottle with a packet of coffee and stick it in there and shake it up, and you're good to go. That's literally no equipment but water. So cleanup time, easy, simple. But the con to that is, it doesn't necessarily taste as great as a real cup of coffee. Some people who are really ultralight packers are trying to keep it really simple because they're riding to camp. They're camping to ride more than riding to camp, and they're trying to keep their pack weight low and their pack size small and simple. This is probably the number one option and the most popular by far because people like simplicity, right? Going off of that, the next step would be coffee in a tea bag. Some of the brands that I know of are High Side Coffee, Wildland Coffee. I think there's that one, Black Rifle, I think may have the coffee in a tea bag option. I saw somebody talking about that the other day. And so option 2 would be coffee in a tea bag. And literally you just need to boil water and put this tea bag in the cup. So if you've got either a container or a vessel that you boil water with, you'll just need your fuel, your stove, a container, water, and you can drop this in there. And then once it cools down, you can drink straight from that container or that vessel. It doesn't necessarily have to be a specific, a special container outside of what you boil from, unless that's what you want to pack in your kit. Clean up on that, really you just soak it for 8 minutes and then you pull it out and you're good to go. Now you just have this bag of coffee grounds that you can dispose of properly. Remember, pack it in, pack it out. What other caveats with these? Now the flavor of this is pretty good. And the ones that we've had are a corn fiber bag. And so you do get quite a bit of sediment and a little bit of fines in the bottom of your cup. And so if you're one who doesn't really like having any kind of grit in your coffee at all, and you really like a clean, crisp coffee, this may not be the one for you, but it's still really easy and convenient. And I know at the beginning I said you have to have a way to boil water, but technically I've made these before overnight and putting it in like a jar of water and letting it cold soak. And you actually could have like a cold brew coffee, which actually works really well. So still a better flavor, I think, than a instant coffee, but not necessarily as good as my next personal favorite, and the easiest in line would be a pour over. Now, pour over, we use a collapsible. The brand is UST. They've got a collapsible pour over stand. It's a cone style. Use a paper filter. You put your coffee grounds in there. You boil your water. You pour it over. It goes straight into your drinking cup. And the cleanup, you just pick up the filter and you throw it away. And then I'll usually wipe out the collapsible pour over stand and then my mug and all that. But really simple, quick, easy cleanup. It does take a little bit more time because you're now having to boil water and then pour it over. And then the steep time, depending on the size of the cup of coffee, is usually, around 3 minutes after you're pouring it and letting it filter through. But I believe that is the best cup of coffee you could have. It's still my personal favorite over all the coffees out there because it's really hard to beat a good pour over. And if you've ever been camping and done a pour over and you've always wondered why camping and coffee is so good, why I should say camp coffee tastes so good. And it's because of it's the pour over and the way the extraction is. And it's something I learned a couple of years ago when we were just diving deep into coffee. And the more I learned about it and realized, oh, well, that's why coffee at camp tasted so good. It's because it's just the way it is, that pour over method, and the extraction you get out of it is just fantastic. And you just get a really good, well-balanced cup of coffee. And so moving on from there would be my next personal favorite, which is the AeroPress. And if you've not seen it before, it's a little cylinder with a cap on the bottom, and you use a very small circle paper filter. You stick in this little cap, you stick it on there, you pour your grounds in there, you pour the water over the top, and there's different ways to do it and different recipes out there. But you let it steep for a little bit, and then you actually plunge and push the coffee and forcing the water through the coffee at the bottom of this cap and into your cup of coffee. And then you unscrew the cap, and you now have this espresso style kind of puck of coffee that you can just pop out. And I like this one because, again, it's a very small paper filter, so not a lot of waste. The puck is really easy to pop out and trash. You can just wipe everything down. You don't have to have a lot of rinsing water to clean it. The only difference is it's a little bit bigger than the flat packing of a collapsible pour over. And then this one takes a little bit more tweaking with the grind size and your steep time. And of course, there's so many different ways to do it out there. I highly suggest somebody, when you're doing this, getting a bag of coffee that you really like, figuring out what the grind size would work for it. I've used regular, auto drip grind, which would be what you would get at the grocery store, and it works fine. What does happen, though, sometimes is if it's too coarse of a grind, when you pour your water in, it just runs straight through like a pour-over, and it runs right out the bottom. And to avoid that, they do the inverted method, or they now have this bottom, I can't remember what it's called, but there's this new cap that you can put on the bottom that's supposed to make it more like an espresso, where it actually has a little rubber hole that it goes through, and that actually prevents any of the water from coming through. And so I've actually used it not really for an espresso style, but for keeping all the water in there without having to get to invert it. Because when you invert it, you're introducing this situation that could be really bad with boiling hot water spilling everywhere. I've done it before. I don't like doing the inversion method just because I'm kind of clumsy at that stuff. And I have a tendency to fill everything to the very top, which probably doesn't help either. So, but the AeroPress, easy, quick cleanup, packs a little bit larger. You have the Go option that we actually stock at motocampnerd.com, and that one, everything nests inside of it. So you have a cup, you've got the AeroPress, you've got the little stirrer, you've got the you can put a little pack of filters in there with it. And so it's relatively small, about the size of, like a little Stanley cup or whatever. So moving on from those two of my favorite ways to brew coffee would be my not so favorite, which is French press. The French press is a tried and true method that a lot of people really enjoy. It's really simple because, like, for example, the Stanley one, you have a vessel that you can boil water in, and it has all the French press pieces where you boil your water, you put your coffee in, you stir it up, you let it steep for a little while, and then you put your screen on top and you push all the grounds to the bottom, and you now have your coffee, and you just pour it out into your cup. I guess technically you can drink it straight from that vessel if you'd like. But what I've found is you get this very muddy-ish kind of coffee, and it's not really gritty, but it's got that silt kind of feel to it, and I'm not a fan. That's just me. I'm never don't like that texture while I'm drinking coffee. I prefer a really clean, crisp, filtered coffee. But that's just me. And then the cleanup. So you have to pull all this after you plunge it and push all the grounds to the bottom. You have to pull it all apart. And on the Stanley version, it's all stuck on the bottom. So now you have to wipe it all out or rinse it all out. And it's pretty cumbersome because if you have a large hand, you're not going to reach down in there and grab it all. And you have to use like a fork or something with a paper towel or rinse it out. And that's just a lot of water that you're kind of wasting. So moving on from the French press, we're kind of getting into like the mocha pot territory, which is you got the little water, what do you call it, like a water tank on the bottom, and you put finely ground coffee in a little basket, and it's almost like a percolator, right, where you're using the steam from the water heating up to push up through. And this is more of when I think of mocha pot, I think of like the Italian style, where it's like a really dense espresso style coffee that's not espresso, right? You don't have the crema to it. You just have the thickness and the condensed coffee flavor. And I've got one that I've messed with for a little while. I've not been able to perfect it. All my coffee is really, really strong or bitter. I've been trying to use the temperature to fluctuate so you don't overly boil, because your temperature range, in the coffee grounds will cause bitter and sour coffee and steep time and all that. So over extraction, under extraction, right? So and then the cleanup for this, right? So okay, you pour it out, and it's got the mocha pot that I've got is, I can't remember the brand, it's the classic Italian one. So you've got your pot on the bottom, your water tank on the bottom, you've got the little basket for your coffee. That's not easy to clean out. You got to shake it all out, wipe it all out. There's always coffee grounds left in. I usually end up rinsing it a lot to get all of the grounds out. And the same thing for the top after it, brews. So some people love it because they just love that, that really strong coffee. And it makes a smaller amount for volume-wise compared to the other methods. You can get the bigger versions, of course, to make a bigger, but then you're talking about pack size and everything else, and it's not necessarily the most convenient. Now, there are other brands out there that make these that are more camp-friendly, and they're collapsible, and you can, take them apart and tear them down. But they all have the same concept with a water tank, a basket, and then you're heating up the water to push the water up and through the coffee and into your cup. This does not use any kind of paper filter, and so again, you're going to get a little bit of sediment. And it's not necessarily a muddy coffee like French press, but it does have a little bit of fines in there. So keep that in mind if that's something you're getting into. And then lastly would be something that I'm recently trying out, which is the little handheld kind of mobile espresso makers. We've actually got some of the Wakeko samples. We are going to be adding those to the store. And so many people talked about it, and I finally bit the bullet and decided to kind of look into it and buy into it and just test it for myself and see what it was all about. And I was actually very surprised because it looks overly complicated and it does have a lot of parts. So that's a pro, or that's a con, that there's a lot of parts you're going to have to use and keep up with and clean, but there's not like a filter for it. You're putting it all together in this little basket and you're pumping it up and you're using the pressure to make a shot of espresso. Now, this has led me down a rabbit hole of espresso makers and espresso making and, methods and theories and possibilities. And I've noticed that you have to be really good with your grind size depending on which unit you're using, because if your grind is not right, you don't get the right extraction and you can end up with a very sour cup of coffee or a shot of espresso to a very bitter shot of espresso really quick. And also, it does matter if you measure. There's one of them that we were messing with that's not as sensitive to measuring, where you just scoop it and pack it and go. And it works pretty good. And I've got a consistent cup of espresso or a shot of espresso out. But I've also noticed it's not a true ratio of what you would get if you just went to a coffee bar and asked for a double shot, right? The ratio that I've been getting out, was 8 grams in for coffee, and I'm getting almost 40 grams of water or liquid weight out. And so the ratio isn't that typical 1 to 2, 2.5, or even 1 to 3. Now this is with the, I was using the mini presso and the nano presso. The Pico Presso is very well built. It's got a portafilter that's kind of similar to what you would see on a real espresso machine. And this is the one that I've not been able to dial in yet because espresso is new to me. And getting that grind size and the weight right with the type of coffee I have has been a fun challenge. And I enjoyed this. Coffee kind of turned into a hobby of mine more than anything. And so going through and getting this dialed in has been, again, a fun challenge. And I still have not got that perfect cup out, but you do get more of that true 1 to 2 to 2.5 ratio because you're using, it's an 18 gram basket. I've been putting between 16 and 17 grams because 18 seems to be too much. And you're getting, 32 to 40 out. And so it's more consistently what you would get from like a coffee shop. Now, it does make great if you do get it a little bitter, a little sour. It's great if you want to add in your milk or whatever else. But I've also found that's really nice and convenient because if you just want a quick shot of coffee for energy, you can use that nano presso or that mini presso, and you just make a quick shot of coffee. It's not as condensed as a real espresso shot would be. You still get a little bit of cream on it, and then you have your cup of quick shot of coffee, you get your energy, you pack it all up, and you hit the road. If you actually want to sit back and enjoy hanging out and enjoy camp and enjoy a cup of coffee, I recommend the other ones. With these espresso portable handheld espresso makers, you've got the basket and the chamber for I don't know what it's called right now, like the portafilter and all that, but there's a lot of pieces and parts you've got to clean. And sometimes if you get your brew right and your shot pulled right, you can just turn it upside down and knock the puck out and you're good to go. Sometimes it's not that easy, and I've had to scrape it out with my finger or blow it out from the backside, and it's just a lot of cleanup in the after. So again, those are all the ones that I can think of that I've been messing around with, and just, of course, my opinion on the easiest to make and use and what you need versus the most difficult, and then all the flavors in between. So if you're looking for something really simple, go with the instant or like a tea bag coffee. If you want something a little bit more refined with good flavor, definitely try an AeroPress or a pour over. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. They're really forgiving with your grind size, and it's kind of fun to play with and get that ratio right. If that's something you're into while you can enjoy camping and, hanging out, making coffee. And then if you're really into coffee, go for the espresso ones because they're fun to play with. And just keep in mind, it's not going to be this quick, easy cup of coffee necessarily. It's just going to be, okay, I'm going to make it, and then I'm going to have to clean up. And one thing that bothers me from those is the water. They get stuck in there. It doesn't really dry out. I've let it sit out on the counter and pumped all the water out I could. And then it's literally sat out for a day or two, and I go back and there's still water in it, and I'm shaking it and pumping and trying to get all the water out, which makes me very concerned if you're on the road and you've got water in there, if it's sitting too long, if it's going to build bacteria. Something I'm going to have to work with more and just see how it pans out. But they do pack really small, and you just have to carry your coffee with you and measure it out, weigh it out, and get your grind right. So that's it for coffee. Hopefully it was helpful and kind of good breakdown on, what you're going to get into, and maybe helped you make a decision on where you want to go with your kitchen or coffee setup. So thanks again for listening, and go find your camp.